And so today we are going to look at social media in greater details. And here's my question for you. How many, I'm sure all of you all must be using some form of social media, but my question to you is, whatever is your top social media, why do you use it? I use social media for entertainment, convenience, connectivity, and we are going to take a deep dive into, the motivations for the marketers to be on social media, and we'll do a very kind of in-depth analysis as to how they are using how marketers are using social media. All right, so let's take a quick brief overview. We are going to look at the basic definitions of social media, characteristics of the social networks, what is social media marketing. We are going to look at how to measure the effectiveness of social media marketing. And one of the aspects of that will be brand engagement in social media, that is co-creation. Okay, let me just change my printer. Researchers Steenberg and Avery in 2008, and this goes a long way back, when they did their research as to why consumers use social media, they found exactly the same reasons that, it helps them to it helps consumers to express themselves digitally, maintain connections, share, their creativity and expressions. And it also helps them to engage with a brand by engaging in co-creation and co-creating experiences. So that's no surprise there. Now, how do we define, social media? So some of the important points to pick up from here is, before we go to social media marketing, what exactly is social media? Social media are platforms, that is, they can be websites or applications, which help the consumers to share their content and to participate in social networking. So these are the key words. Sharing, creativity, and connection are some of the important aspects of social media. And so again, interconnectivity, interdependence. So that's exactly what I told you, but this is just a different way of putting the same definition of social media. The other word here that is important is collaboration. Okay, so given our understanding of what are social media platforms, you all are users of social media platforms, social networks, and so let's take a look at some of the key characteristics of these social networks. So first is the type of audience that you find on social networks. There are two types of audience that you find: social searchers and social browsers. Now, social searchers are people who just, who are lurking on the social media just to, collect information about people in their network. So, for example, your friends, you want to keep updated with what your friends are doing in their worlds, and you use social media to connect with them or keep updated about them. So that is a social searchers. So it is essentially used by people like you and me to, enrich our personal lives and enrich our connections with the people in our network. Then we have social browsers. Social browsers are individuals who use the websites to find people or groups online, communities with whom they want to connect offline. So you could probably be searching for connections, new connections, and you may want to connect with absolute, you may connect with absolute strangers. So that is social browsers. So can you think of some website where you would engage in social browsing? LinkedIn, exactly. So the dating apps are an example of social browsing. And LinkedIn, so social browsing for personal enrichment, and LinkedIn is for professional enrichment. So you are trying to build your networks. All right, so moving right along. Okay, the second characteristic is the type of network. So you also, when you are looking at the social networks, you have to take a look at their characteristics. So for example, vertical networks. Now, vertical networks are very focused networks of individuals who share a common hobby or interest. So for example, LinkedIn is one. So LinkedIn is a network of professionals. And the whole idea of these vertical networks is that they are super specialized groups of people with in-depth knowledge in a particular area, and you can use that to build your skills or gain more insights about a particular area. So for example, if you connect with LinkedIn professionals in your area, say marketing analytics, you stand to gain a lot. So there are a lot of vertical communities which are specializing in a certain area. Can you think of any examples that come to your mind other than LinkedIn? So I am a programmer, and I program in a software called R. And there's a community of R, which is called as RStan. So RStan is a type of R program. It's a more highly specialized kind of programming interface of R. So that's called as RStan. And so there I'm a member of our Stan community where I get free help if I'm stuck in my programs. Another that comes to my mind is GitHub. And GitHub is also a community of programmers where they provide you with a lot of help with source codes and data. And another example, but there's another community which is called as Meetups. Meetup. Have you heard of this one? In Sydney. So there are a lot of meetup groups. Now, Meetup is a very vertical network, but within that, if you like to play games, then probably you can join this community of Meetup consumers who enjoy a particular game. And it's, again, this is an example like Reddit, but it is more vertical in the sense that it is into very clearly defined communities that exist on Meetup. So for example, there is Meetup for singles, there is Meetup for individuals who enjoy equestrian activities, and so on. Okay. Then we come to the third characteristic, which is also a very important characteristic. It is called as the degree of centralization or openness of the network. So this characteristic basically deals with data transferability of the individual consumer. So for example, social lock-in. So social lock-in is one aspect of degree of centralization of a network. That is where a user is unable to transfer their social contacts and content from one social network to another. So if I'm on one social network, I cannot take my data and transfer it to another social network. Where do you think you observe this? Where there's, for example, high degree of privacy in that network for individuals who are using the network. So there you'll notice social lock-in. Okay. Yes, WhatsApp. What about dating websites? What do you think about dating websites? So for example, let's talk about I'm sure that at some point of time, some of you either are dating or would have dated at some point of time. So let's talk about some of the common websites. So one is Tinder, Bumble, I think. So Bumble, if you are on Bumble and you're dating, you cannot, transfer your personal information from Bumble to another dating network. Say, for example, you want to open an account on RSVP or Tinder, but you cannot, just transfer that information from Bumble to Tinder. So whatever you have on Bumble remains on Bumble, including your conversation. So if You notice that the same person is on the other website as well, but you are having a conversation with person A on Bumble, and person A also exists on RSVP, and you both are engaging in a conversation, but your conversations on RSVP with person A are going to remain in that particular medium. So that is called as social lock-in. You cannot transfer your data. And opposite to that is the idea of identity portability. Now, identity portability means you can use your identity on one social network platform to be able to log into another, say, website or another, e-commerce store. So where do you think you have you come across identity portability in any way? Any website that you have come across which allows you to use your identity of a social network platform to be able to gain access? Let's think about Amazon. So if you're shopping at Amazon and you want to log into Amazon, what are the different ways that Amazon allows you to log in? These are the key features of, these are the three main characteristics of social networks that are kind of important to consider when brands are trying to, reach out to consumers. Okay. So having learned the characteristics of the network, now let's take a look at, how the brands or how the firms, how the companies are using social media and these characteristics to collect data from social media. So one is the firms are actually engaging in collecting all of that data on the social media to extract value from that data. So how are firms able to do that? They are able to do that by using analytics. That is, by collecting all of that data, analyzing that data, and trying to derive some insights and information that will help them then make decisions or design campaigns for those social networks. So that's the whole idea of analytics. Now, social media data, you have to remember, is very powerful data because it comes in real time. So what are some of the insights that businesses can extract from that? One is identifying the key influencers in the network. So here is an example of network of universities in New Zealand. And over here, the biggest red dot you see is the University of Auckland. This dot is for Massey University. This is another big dot, that is University of Canterbury. And the others are smaller dots, which are the other universities of New Zealand. So the bigger the dots, so you don't have to worry how to create this network. There are dashboards available which will give you this output. All you have to do is you have to understand how to analyze that output. So when you input the social media data in a dashboard, it is going to show you this output, which indicates where the bigger dots indicate the bigger players in the network. Now, why are they bigger players? So for example, let's take a look at University of Auckland. Now, University of Auckland is a bigger player because it is connected not only within New Zealand. So this is a network of universities within New Zealand, but these are also the external connections of this university. So that means there's a lot of research that the university is engaging in, which is outside of New Zealand as well as within New Zealand with other universities. Also, if you look at this university, it has, University of Auckland has some strong ties with Massey University, and it has strong indirect ties with University of Canterbury through the Auckland University of Technology, this little dot here. So all of these dots are interconnected through these lines. The more, the stronger the lines, that means there is more dense network of connection between that big dot and those, that cluster of dots over here. So for example, this is another university pointed out over here. So apparently this university, the smaller one, has a lot of research or engagement with the University of Auckland. So the bigger players are the key influencers in a network. And how can brands harness those key influencers? Can you think of ways in which brands can harness those influencers? Useful tool for small businesses. So a lot of research has shown that influencers can really help the small businesses grow. And of late, post-COVID, we've noticed the rise of Instagram influencers, micro-influencers, micro-bloggers. So micro-influencers are those who have a size of 0 to 10,000. And these are individuals who can, use the products, advertise the products, and they can really help these small brands to grow. What are some of the big influencers that you think exist globally or in Australia? Can you think of a few names? Chris Hemsworth, in fact, he's kind of become very popular in those short form videos on the YouTube channel, where I've noticed of late he's, putting out these little videos highlighting how his family is, outdoors, enjoying, engaging in various activities. And he also, during the COVID period, he talked a lot about maintaining your health, doing gym workouts from home, and he put out those little videos on TikTok as to what are the simple, workouts you can do. Another example is Kim Kardashian. And I'm sure that you all are familiar with who that is. And how much does Kim Kardashian charge for one tweet or one post? Any idea? To the tune of $1 million approximately. So, and this is just an approximate figure, it might actually be higher. So that is how much she charges. So these influencers are so powerful that they can make or break the brands. And, when these people talk about a brand, the followers, they just go into a frenzy and go buy the brands. So that is one. So that is about influencers. The other one is about network structure. So this is also important. So in the previous slide, we had focused on these dots to understand what is important. In this slide, we are going to focus on the density of these lines and the connections. So here is an example of a network for government organizations in Korea. So this is the Korean network, and in the US. So this is the American network. And what I want to point out here, the key insights are that these networks highlight and they tell you the dynamics that goes on in that particular network. So let me tell you about the Korean community from what I have learned through research. So it's a very highly connected society that is more matriarchal, and their decisions are taken by consulting with other members of the community, right? So, and they do not value uncertainty. So they do not like uncertainty. Opposed to that, so when they have to make decisions, they will always contact their network of members, their friends and community to, seek their advice before they make decisions. On the other hand, we have the American public sector organizations where you will see it's a very sparse network of connectivity. And the reason is because American society is an individualistic society, which, is comfortable with the idea of uncertainty and decision-making on an individual basis for an issue where there is a lot of uncertainty. So you will notice that the individuals working in these different public sector organizations in the US are less connected in terms of the social networks with one another because they are used to making decisions on by themselves. So without having the need to consult, they are more of risk takers. So that's That's the idea. So these dense networks, so this is an example of a government organization. We can transfer that to a marketing context. So for example, Facebook is a dense network of consumers, which is why a lot of brands are on Facebook, and Facebook advertising is one very, popular way to grow your brand. If you are a small brand, you're launching a new brand. So Facebook marketing, Facebook advertising is one of the key tactical tools that you have. And if you come across a sparse network, that would be a very niche community of users. So for example, let's say in Australia, we are very health conscious, and most of the Aussies are into exercising, good healthy diets. But within that big network of the big population of consumers, there would be niche networks that follow certain type of diets. So let's say there is a community of users who follows keto diet, right? So that is a niche network. Now, in terms of marketing, it becomes crucial for marketers to identify which are the niche networks, which are the most popular dense networks. And so if you are marketing a product in a mature product category, then probably Facebook advertising is a great way to go. But if you are launching very specific keto products, then probably you have to track down the communities which are talking about keto products and reach out to those communities. Having said that, I will also say that now, because of technological developments, while Facebook is one big network of users, Facebook also has their own community pages, right? So there might be a community of Facebook users that is very interested in keto products. So that is that niche group where marketers can target their consumers. Okay, so having collected all of that information about key influencers, about the network structure on social media. So my question to you is, how do firms use all of that marketing intelligence? How do you think that firms use all of that information that they've gathered about influencers and dense networks? In potential, exactly. So there's so much data coming in real time that it's now made it easier for firms to collect the data, not only about what the customers are talking about their brand, but also about competitor brands, to identify problems in advance. So this is something that we look into the slides that are coming soon. To verify trends, very good. So some very good points coming here. So social media data gives the brands a power to think ahead when they are marketing their products. Social media data is also driving a lot of innovation. So good points here. Now these are all of sort of the tactical tools that you've identified. On a strategic basis, firms can use this marketing intelligence to engage consumers on social media. Okay, so that is in the long term. They can use all of this marketing intelligence to grow their brands. And how do firms grow their brands? By engaging the consumers, providing rich experiences to the consumers, that is in co-creation. So co-creation is one of the activities by which the brands keep the consumers engaged in the long term. And co-creation essentially means you are inviting your customers or your key stakeholders to, co-design products or engage in problem-solving processes. And recent research shows that more than half of the businesses are now piloting co-creation projects to drive innovation. And like some of you mentioned, to uncover trends, to identify market opportunities, understand how the competition is what the competitors are doing, and to take the products in new directions or find niche areas. So all of that is possible with co-creation. And here are some examples that I want to show you. So for example, Capital One. So this is a credit card, And what Capital One, this company, allows you is to personalize your credit card. So you can take your image and post it on, have it printed on your credit card. And so, for example, here is a user whose wife is swimming with the sharks. And so that image comes onto their card. So this is one great example of co-creation. This is very highly personalized. Another example that you would have experienced, I'm sure, is Co-Create IKEA. So this is a digital platform by IKEA where they encourage consumers and fans to develop new products. So the example here is about, the tiffin box that IKEA has developed in consultation with commuters who are customers of IKEA. So what they noticed was that the commuters wanted, these boxes, food boxes, to be light and not very bulky, made from sustainable materials, and also have dividers so that they can put different varieties of foods in their boxes. So that's how this product came about. Then IKEA also co-collaborated with university students. So what is very important to university students when it comes to buying stuff? So here is the furniture that university students helped them to design. They wanted flexibility, they wanted adaptability, they wanted furniture that helps them to find their stuff pretty fast, and they chose the raw wood frame. What do you think was one of the motivations behind the raw wood frame, which is not mentioned here, but which is also a very important driving factor for students? So students are very price conscious, right? And that's one of the reasons why this type of material was chosen, so that it provides not only flexibility, but it also economizes on their budgets. And apart from this, IKEA also, I'm sure you all, you have been to IKEA at some point of time. IKEA also has their, restaurants, in-store restaurants where people can go and eat. And IKEA in Australia in particular has been expanding on their, food menu that they offer to their consumers. And they are developing those menu items in consultation with the consumer. So, every time they plan to launch a new dish on that menu, they call the consumers for food tasting, but also take their suggestions that, for example, they launched their recent range of vegetarian options in the store. And they invited consumers to come to their store and try these options and give them the feedback and what they liked, what were the items they did not like. So all these are examples of co-creation. And on Facebook, the most common examples that you will see would be, for mature product categories like pizza companies, which are always inviting consumers to come and design or create their own pizzas. For example, I know Pizza Hut does that, and I think Domino's also probably does that, but Pizza Hut definitely, I've seen their ads for co-creation. So these are all examples of how firms use, all that marketing intelligence to co-create brands and experiences. So the benefits that we have seen are the new products that come out of co-creation. Can you think of some risks that arise out of co-creation? If brands do not exercise control over this co-creation activity, they might just lose control. They might, which might result in angry consumers if their ideas are not taken on board, or it might result in bad faith actors who are giving them ideas that might actually not be transferable to an entire community of consumers of the brand. So definitely these are some of the risks that are involved. Okay, so the benefits we have talked about. Benefits is engaging the consumers. In the long term, it leads to loyalty and liking. So some of you have already mentioned brand loyalty towards Facebook, authentic word of mouth marketing. So if consumers are happy, obviously they're going to tell their friends about it. So lack of control and quality issues are some of the risks, like you mentioned right now, transferability of the product to a broad community of users of that brand. So co-creating experiences is one long-term strategy that firms use to grow their brands on social media using all of that marketing intelligence. The second is social media marketing. So all of the information that is coming from social media, it's real time. So firms are able to track what the consumers are talking about. And that can further be used in designing tactical tools like some of you all mentioned just now, to identify trends, to reach out to consumers with new innovative marketing, right? So let us look at what is the definition of social media marketing. So social media marketing is how the businesses, they use social media channels to understand and engage with customers or with potential customers. So that's no surprise here. But what is important here is this particular slide. In what are the different ways that they can establish those relationships? So one is, so on social media, there are two types of profiles. So one is two types of consumers, or the designs on those social media platforms. One is the profile-based social media platforms where individual consumers have their profiles. The other one is content-based platforms, like one of you mentioned, Reddit, which is a community of users where there are community pages where every user can come and talk about a particular topic. So accordingly, marketeers can send two types of messages: customized messages or broadcast messages. And when the firms want to reach out, the brands want to reach out with a customized message to an individual user, that can be used to establish relationships, build relationships, engage with consumers, to communicate with their consumers. And brands usually do this using messages which are not promotional in nature. So for example, Facebook Messenger is one of the examples of sending customized messages to individual users. During the COVID, so this is one example I want to share with you out of my own research that I'm doing on luxury brands. When COVID struck, all of the luxury brands, which typically operated using physical stores to establish that exclusivity, these luxury brands had to close down their stores and shift all of their marketing onto social media. So that was tremendous pressure on the brands, but they kind of innovated in different ways. One of the ways was Facebook Messenger, they launched chatbots. So brands like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, they launched their chatbots on Facebook Messenger during the COVID period, so that they could send out personalized messages to their consumers every time a consumer went on to the social media page of Louis Vuitton. And the idea of these social media chatbots was to engage the consumers and help them find the relevant information that they were looking for. And the broader idea of the whole marketing through chatbots was to establish a relationship with their consumers, to provide probably, if not the same, but a similar experience that they would have gotten in the store. So that was the whole idea. The other way that marketeers can send customized messages to content-based platforms like Reddit, or is in the form of service. So it allows the marketeers to answer the questions that the community of users might have, or to even address after sales or customer support service. So I want you to tell me the name of a platform which is very commonly used by firms as an after sales service platform. Twitter. Twitter is one example, which although the use of Twitter has gone down over time, but a lot of firms are actually using Twitter or Facebook to provide that after-sales service or customer service support. And this is primarily used in the airlines industry, where you would have noticed that when consumers are angry because of their experiences of flying, they will immediately go onto the social media and voice their thoughts and opinions, and the firms use social media to address and support, provide their support publicly. That is also a part of their brand building exercise to show how engaged they are with their consumers. Now, another way that firms can broadcast messages to individual consumers, when they do that, that is a form of self-media, that is marketing on social media. And you will notice that most of the companies do this. So they, for example, firms have their own social media pages, Facebook pages, where they launch promotions, they give out special deals on social media to their followers. So that's all an example of marketing on social media. So you have the firms continually monitor the number of followers they have on their social media pages. The idea is to market, those are brand loyal followers. So marketing on social media can be effective if you have a large amount of following. And then we have creative outlets. So this is, again, a broadcast message to all of the content-based communities, where the firms can just engage in simply advertising their products, what they are selling, or it allows marketers to share their innovations and new products that are coming in the market. So here the idea is not engagement as much as just simply advertising. All of the rest, that is relationship, service, self-media, these are all ways for firms to engage with their consumers. This matrix that you see over here is called as the Zhu and Shen matrix. These are two researchers who had probably about 10, 15 years ago, studied different types of social medias to understand how firms are making use of social media, and this continues to remain popular and is still very much used in the market. Okay, so the next section, which is an important section, is about measuring the effectiveness of social media marketing. So firms are collecting a lot of intelligence, they are using that intelligence, but how do they measure the effectiveness of their long-term strategies and short-term tactics that they are using to engage customers? So to be able to understand the effectiveness of social media, we have to look at it from two aspects. That is, what are the consumers doing on social media? Now, consumers are engaging on social media with a brand in two ways. One is that they are, seeing the posts, they are liking the posts, they are sharing the posts. So they are engaging in some type of actions. So firms are continually monitoring those actions, and that is called as action analytics. The other way that consumers engage with a brand is by posting comments. So firms are collecting that data as well, real-time textual data on comments, to identify what the consumers are talking about. And that is called as text analytics. And both of these are very powerful ways of designing tactical tools in the immediate short term, as well as driving innovation in the long term, or building or growing the brand in the long term. Now, because ours is digital media and digital marketing and social media subject, we are going to concentrate more on text analytics. Actions analytics is a very in-depth area which involves building models and analyzing the data that comes in real time, and can be of different types, like, for example, descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics. So that's a whole different field altogether, which is beyond the scope of the subject. So we are going to just touch upon action analytics. In your projects, you're going to do a very basic part of action analytics, which is called as descriptive analytics. But believe me, it is one of the most important parts. That's where all of the analytics starts from. And we are also going to concentrate in the subject on text analytics, that is evaluating those comments to see what kind of information that firms can mine. So as digital marketeers, if you're planning to make this your profession, then this is going to be very useful to you. And what you're going to learn in this section is something that you should put down on your resumes as well. Okay, let's see. So actions analytics, like I mentioned, deals with monitoring the actions, that is, we call them as engagement metrics, which are likes, dislikes, shares, mentions, endorsements, etc. And to monitor, you extract all of that data, which like what you will do in your projects, and then analyze that data to understand how engaged are your consumers. If they are, for example, they are liking a post quite a fair bit, then you can use that information to create similar content on the same social media page or other social media pages, because you know what your consumers like. Or if they are viewing the content, but they might not be liking the content so much, or probably they are inactive consumers, but they still are viewing your content, then that has a different implications. Then you can use that kind of content to create campaigns which might go viral, or which consumers might share. Or if consumers are sharing your content a lot, then that means that you can use that type of content to create more brand awareness, to create more brand recall on social media through ways of advertising. Or you can use that for referrals. So that action analytics is very powerful to engage in designing your tactical tools. The second form is text analytics. Text analytics, like I mentioned, is analyzing all of the comments, the blog posts, the Facebook status updates of consumers. And the kind of information that you can glean from this is very useful, which we call as data mining. So how do firms engage in data mining? That is in different ways, like sentiment mining, intention mining, topic and idea mining, trend mining. So let's take a look at each one of these. So the first one is sentiment mining. So what is sentiment mining? So sentiment mining is trying to understand what the consumers are saying about your brand or about the other brand. So there are two parts to this. The first one is social listening, where the brands are monitoring real time the social media posts. And they're trying to figure out how consumers are reacting to a brand or event. So it can be, there might be two types of reactions, positive or negative. So that gives firms an overall picture about the brand health. So are your consumers happy with your brand? How about the competitor brand? So it helps the firms to compare the brand health of your brand with that of a competitor brand. So if the consumers are happy with your brand, but they are super happy with a competitor brand, then that calls for some sort of actions or analysis as to why that must be happening. So that is just called as social listening, monitoring the posts to see how the consumers are reacting. Second part is a more in-depth analysis. If you want to see those reactions in greater details, then you engage in what is called as sentiment analysis, because that's a whole mine of data which allows you to uncover various types of information. So the simplest way is that in sentiment analysis, you take the comments made by the individual users to a post, and you can classify them as positive, negative, or neutral. So for example, if a consumer writes, my experience of buying and using this brand has been fantastic. So that's a very positive emotion, right? But if the consumer says, I use this product, it was useless, like my shirt in the first wash, it shrunk. So that's a very negative sentiment. But if the consumer says, yeah, I'm okay with the product so far, so that's very neutral sentiment. So the firms can identify these sentiments, by analyzing those comments. And we classify those comments into positive, negative, and neutral. And so, for example, if you're analyzing 100 comments, You will classify each of the comments into positive, negative, neutral, and then you will take a look at overall how many positive comments, how many negative comments, how many neutral comments. That will give you an overall picture of what your consumers think about your brand. So when we are doing social media sentiment analysis, there are two metrics which are very, very useful. And this is something, if you as digital marketers are making a career in this area, you should definitely have these on the top of your mind. So the first metric is called as the net sentiment. So I just explained to you how we, classify the posts into positive and negative. So this net sentiment score allows you to classify the overall emotion ranging from negative 100 to positive 100. So negative 100 means very negative sentiment. Very positive, positive 100 means your consumers are super happy. Now, that is called as the net sentiment. The second important metric here is the passion intensity. This is also very important. It is called as the strength of emotions. So for example, if the consumer says, I have been using the product, I'm very happy. That is one intensity of emotion. But if the consumer says, I have been using this product, I'm really excited to see what's coming more, what more variants are coming out. That is another stronger intensity of the same positive emotions. The third one says, I'm exhilarated, I'm thrilled to have used this product. I cannot wait to buy the latest, variant of this model, or I cannot wait to try out the latest model of this product. That is another super higher level of positive emotion. So that is called a strength of emotions. How does the strength or the passion that consumers display when they are talking about your brand, that is called as passion intensity. And that also ranges from negative 100 to positive 100. And together, when you combine, you take a weighted average of the two scores, the net sentiment and the passion intensity, and that is called as brand passion. So you don't have to do this manually. There are dashboards, there are softwares available to calculate this. But the whole idea is, how are you able to calculate brand passion? That is using the net sentiment and the passion intensity. Then you're able to say that if the consumers feel positive, how positive are they? Are they very enthused, or do you need to run some marketing campaigns to build that brand loyalty? So those are some of the ways that you talk about sentiment. When you're doing sentiment analysis, you are analyzing that textual data. So apart from sentiment, you can also figure out intentions. So for example, if the consumers are using the words like, I cannot wait to buy the new model of the iPhone. So that is telling you about the intention of the consumers. How many are looking forward to your product? So those are intentions. One of the intentions that is recommendation, you will see very commonly observed in these comments, and that is in terms of negative word of mouth. So if, for example, airlines industry, you will see this quite a fair bit. If the consumers have had a bad experience when they were flying, they will immediately come and put it on social media. So I was flying Qantas, their quality of food is really bad. So that is, in other words, a recommendation to the rest of the consumers. It's negative word of mouth. Positive recommendation, also you will see, for example, I use this product, it's lovely. I will tell my friends about it. So that is again intention, your intention to buy the product, recommend the product. And in case of, for example, Nike. So Nike was, it's a great company with great products. They have a huge following of consumers, but sometime back, they were in the media for child labor issues because in their factories in Bangladesh and other developing countries. So a lot of consumers blasted the company for engaging in unethical production processes using child labor, and it was all on social media. So that is an example of, the consumers were like, I will not buy the product. Even shame on you, Nike. These were some of the comments that I had seen on social media. So that is again intention, which tells you about the consumers wanting to quit buying the product. So these are the ways that you can uncover intention or intention mining. So if you've observed anything about intention mining on social media, do put it in the chat and I'll pick it up from there. Okay, so intention mining for marketeers is a great way to find new potential consumers who want to buy that product. It can be a great way to service the existing customers who are having trouble with the product. And another example I want to tell you is about intention mining is, for example, companies like Heinz, Pepsi, they intentionally put out posts which, like coax the consumers to give them ideas. So I will buy this product if it is on promotion, something like that. When consumers, they are giving away their intentions to buy the product based on certain conditions. So it's a whole data mine to uncover how the consumers are thinking. All right, so then next, what you can do with that rich social media data is topic and idea mining. So a part of this is, again, this is not surprising. I'm sure you all understand it. Companies, because this data is coming in real time, it's very unstructured. So the firms, what they do is they take all of these comments and they put it through softwares, machine learning softwares. One of them is called as natural language processing, which is used to do sentiment mining. Then in that software, it is based on two types of algorithms. One of the algorithms is called as extractor, which means it extracts the overall sentiment. And the second algorithm is called as a classifier. So it takes that data and classifies it into different types of topic around which that sentiment evolves. So that gives an idea to the companies, what are the consumers talking about? So what is the topic being talked about? So for example, if we look at this particular comment, I love nacho cheese Doritos. So here the consumer is talking about Doritos. More specifically, they are talking about cheese. And the sentiment is very positive because they're using the word love. So you have to look out for these very specific keywords like cheese, nacho, Doritos, or any other flavors. So if they are talking, I wish this flavor existed, spicy cheese Doritos existed. So that is going to give the companies an idea of what type of products that consumers want. Another great examples is apparels. Whenever Zara launches its collections, the consumers are quick to take a look and they will put their comments. Oh, I love this design. I love this dress. I wish it was available in my favorite red color. So that gives an idea to the brands that, okay, the general sentiment is very positive. Probably we can introduce a red variant. Now, topic and idea mining matters a lot in the apparels industry to these fast fashion retailers because they are launching their products every 2 weeks. So this data is very important to them. And some of the ways that, firms can do this analysis, apart from the one that I told you, is another, apart from using natural language processing, firms can also create what is called as word clouds. Again, you don't have to, you can use softwares, dashboards where you just feed in the textual data and they will create a word cloud of the topics that are being talked about quite a fair bit. So that's about topic and idea mining. The last one is trends mining. So this is very important. If you don't, this is called as predictive analytics. Like idea mining, it tells you about where is the movement towards, what is the likely trends which are going to shape the future product designs. So if we are able to predict the future product designs based on the trends, so that is called as predictive analytics. And one of the very rich sources, if you, as students, you would not have access to company data, but if you're a consultancy or if you're planning to do some work of your own, then sites like Google Trends and just monitoring the social media data of the firms will give you a lot of information about trend mining. So in the project, you will be collecting the social media data on comments, on engagement metrics that will help you identify the patterns, try to figure out the trends, the topics that consumers are talking about. And I'm going to quickly show you what Google Trends is all about. And you can use Google Trends in a very powerful way to enrich your knowledge and also for your projects. So let me just quickly stop sharing this and bring up the screen for Google Trends. So I'm going to. So you can go to Google and just type trends. And it's going to bring up Google Trends. You click on this. And this is the page that is going to open for you. Notice that this is the Australian Google Trends that I'm looking at, but you can change that to any country that you want. Now, let's just take a quick look at this page. So you can see some of the trends that are being talked about. Taylor Swift, Kim Kardashian, both of them are key influencers like we discussed earlier on. So there was also interest in the World Cup in the past 7 days where consumers were talking about the World Cup and also soccer and American football. So these are the trends which are being talked about worldwide or, in the US. What else? Latest stories and insights. So in this section, you can see what was the year in search in 2022, explore the year through the lens of Google Trends data. And you will also see in Australia in particular, we just had the Sydney World Pride 2023, where I think about a huge number of consumers had walked that. So I'm not quite sure about the number. Was it 50,000 or 500,000? I'm not sure, probably 50,000 consumers or people had taken part in World Pride, huge events. So that is being talked about. So this is one of the trends. And then visualizing the data. So this is also where you will get a lot of information. So coffee versus tea probably has been trending in the past week in Australia. So are you a coffee drinker or you are a tea drinker? So you can see all of these insights that Google Trends data will provide you. Very, very visual insights, and that is very useful. So if you want to explore a certain topic in detail, let me put fashion because I was talking to you about Zara. So let's talk about, what is being spoken about, fashion. So we want to know about Australia. So I'm going to change this to Australia, and you will see how the search for this topic. So Google Trends collects data and gives you the information about how much consumers are searching about this keyword. So my keyword here is fashion. Now you will notice that in March, the metric says the search for keyword score, the keyword fashion was a score of 91. And then in April, it went in May of 2022, it went to 100 and then again went down. And if you will notice, it again peaked to 94 in October and then again started going down. So what are these metrics? What are these numbers? So fashion 100, and before that it was 87. So to understand this number 100 tells you what was the interest to search for this term during that time period. So if the interest is 100, you interpret it in the following way. It means that it is at the value of 100 is the peak popularity for the term. A value of 50 means it is half as popular. And a value of 0 means there was not enough interest in searching for this term. So here it is 100, and then again it rises to 100 in October. So it tells us that probably this cyclical movement in search for the term fashion, with two peaks in May and October, tells us that probably these were the times when the designers in Australia launched their winter collection and the summer collection. So the winter collection probably was around this time of May, because we have the seasons reverse. So probably in May or around this time when the collections were being launched and consumers became very interested. And then the next collection came somewhere around October, could have been quite possibly the summer collection. And so people were very curious around this time to understand what were the latest designs coming in. So these are some of the metrics that you can look at, and not only just the overall trends and the search interests, you will also notice by sub-region, where are these searches coming from? So for example, in South Australia, people are highly interested in searching about fashion as compared to Western Australia, where the search is only 81. Now, what are the related topics being talked about? So in fashion, people are also talking about Paris Fashion Week, and they're also talking about runways. What are the related queries? So the related queries are around these topics over here: Melbourne Fashion Week 2023. So that means in 2022, people are also trying to figure out where the shows going to be launched in 2023, collections going to be launched in 2023. So it's a whole rich mine of data that you must definitely explore as marketeers and also as students of this subject if you want to build a profile in this particular area and careers in this area. Okay, now I will come back to our main lecture slides. Activity. So I put out some, news articles out there, which I would like you to read through and reflect on them. They are not very tough, but use these questions to as your guide to what is important in those articles. So a short recap. So the important parts that we covered in today's lecture were the characteristics of the social media network websites, in terms of the audience, in terms of the relationship between the members, and the degree of centralization. So degree of centralization was an important topic that we looked at. Social media as a source of marketing intelligence. So here we had looked at that it is used to identify influencers in the networks by means of those dots, and the density of network tells us how well connected the users are. And finally, we looked at how can firms use all of that intelligence to grow their brands in terms of co-creation, social media marketing, and finally, one of the most important sections of this lecture was measuring the effectiveness of social media in terms of action analytics and text analytics, where we concentrated on sentiment analysis.